Thanks for joining us this week on Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. Join your hosts Chris Marriott and Paul Schreiner each week as they talk email marketing, life, purpose, faith, but mainly email marketing. If you're looking for some normalcy in these crazy times, you've come to the right place.
Welcome back to Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. My name's Paul Schreiner, one of the founders at Audience Point / ListFit. I'm with my forever friend,
Chris Marriott. Founder and president of Email Connect.
Cool.
And co-host of Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee with my good friend, Paul Schreiner.
And whether or not you are watching on YouTube or listening through some audio channel, we are so glad you're on board. We're recording this on the day of, I believe, the upcoming apocalypse. I checked my calendar, and that's U.S. Election Day 2020. So, when historians look back on this, they'll say, okay, that was the day. That's what the before picture.
But because Paul and I are professionals, we understand that the show must go on, and we're here bringing you our show, episode 2 of season 4. Today, we've got another great guest for you. Really fabulous story of endurance, human spirit, and generosity of spirit.
Yeah, you're going to love this show. Honestly, this is one of those, he's an amazing guy. You're going to love listening to it.
But who's bringing us this show this week, Paul?
Well, that's what I was going to say was, Chris, brought to you by Audience Point ListFit. In whether or not you're watching this today, day of election, or post-apocalypse, when there is a lack of information everywhere, it underscores the need for good information, good data, right? Good data drives good decisions. And at Audience Point, at ListFit, that's what we've tried to do, is really create sort of a better data source to give marketers better data so they can make better decisions. And we're super excited about it.
Great. And
about Email Connect.
Email Connect. We're here to help brands connect with the right MarTech vendors, whether they be ESPs, CRM, CDPs, or anything else that involves customer engagement and messaging. If you've got an RFP in your future, please contact us to talk about how we can help save you a ton of money.
Man, I would love to know more about that, Chris. I think I may contact you.
I would love it if you called me. But remember, call me on my cell phone, not my landline.
Got it. Well, with that, yes.
With that, let's get to the program. We'll see you after the program with our good friend and fan favorite producer, David Inman.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Welcome back to Email Geeks at Home Drinking Coffee. With us today, we have a special guest, my friend, Rob DeCou. Rob and I have known each other for a long time, but he's recently put up a really, I think, interesting feat of human endurance, will, all those things. And I want him to talk about that. He just completed an Uberman triathlon, or I'm not sure. We'll let him tell more about that. But prior to that, he is, I know that he did Leadville, which is a 100-mile race through the mountains of Colorado. That was kind of a precursor to all of this craziness. He's done events through Death Valley, where he pushes his body to just inhuman limits, swimming across the Straits of Juan de Fuca in the middle of the tides, all of the things. And he's figured out a way to tie these incredible feats to pretty cool outcomes for victims of human trafficking. So I want to talk about that today too. Anyway, great to have you today, Rob. A business owner, endurance athlete, father, husband, man of integrity. So great to have you today. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Cool.
And I'm here too.
Kind of, right?
And I'm here too.
One of the things that we do to start out, Rob, is it is Email Geeks at Home. And so Chris and I, both geeks, both nerds on that front, but we also like to drink coffee. Now, today I don't have coffee, but we usually go around the horn, talk about what we're drinking. So, Chris, you want to start us out today?
Yeah, Paul, and I'm cutting you a little slack this week because I'm not drinking my usual drink. I'm drinking ugly water. Those of you who've watched our show, we had the CEO Hugh on in season 2, and I'm drinking their delicious pink grapefruit flavored sparkling water. So not drinking coffee, drinking flavored sparkling water.
Well, and I am drinking what I like to call stuff I found in the office. Basically, it's been a crazy morning for me. Our van was totaled. Our son got into an accident on Friday. He's okay, but it's been a crazy day. Like getting a rental car, getting all the contents out of our van that's been the family vehicle forever, and racing here. And what do we have in the office that I can drink? So anyway, drinking a thing I like to call Bai, which someone brought in, I think 2.5 years ago. So absolutely delicious.
At the peak of its freshness. Good.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Rob, what do you got today?
My drink of choice in the morning is usually French press coffee. So I go Major Dickinson's from Pete's. And then I have my coffee cup. This is from the Don's Net Cafe. So this was a high school entrepreneurship group out of Santa Barbara. I used to volunteer for under Miss B. It's one of the top entrepreneurship programs in the country. Just love working with those kids. Yeah, it's a great group. And one thing I loved about Don's Net Cafe is if you walk in there, absolute chaos. And if you guys are around any type of creative space and you want to know like beautiful creative work, you walk in there and it should be absolute chaos, but you'll see people engaged. And so I just love that about that classroom. And I love that all the teachers and administrators would walk in and are like, what are these people doing? But the results speak for themselves, and you kind of see how dynamic those environments are.
Well, speaking of dynamic environments, I want to there's so many things I want to talk about with you because you're one of my favorite people in the world. So let's start with the crazy, what you just finished. Tell us what it is for starters, because not everybody knows.
All right.
Not anybody knows until he tells us.
Yeah. And actually hardly anyone knows about this race. It's kind of an underground event. And it's funny when you talk to people like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. And I was like, no, I don't think you have.
You have.
But I remember sitting in a Rotary meeting before I did Solo Race Across America. And I was telling everyone about this. And one of the producers in there, one of my good friends, Brady Connell, was like, you guys need to stop for a second and listen to what Rob's saying. And so this is what I want to do now. Like, just stop for a second and try to just soak in the volume of this. So Race Across America was 12 days, a little over 3,000 miles, nonstop cycling. You're just moving the whole time. As every second you can be on the bike, you're doing that. So this was
to clarify, this is just you on the bike.
This was just me all the way this is back in 2016, all the way. And I saw the room, you could see people like that, like, oh, wow. Like it just, because when people hear about a cross country trip, they think about a cross country tour, like you're taking a month or two. And so it was that was that time where I realized like you really have to slow walk people through these events because it's even after you do them, it's hard to get your head around it. So after Solo Race Across America, I never thought I'd do anything more difficult. And this event was more difficult. And the reason was I am such a sucky swimmer that the event starts with a 21-mile swim from Catalina Island to Palos Verdes. So 21-mile swim.
So 21 miles straight.
Great. So if you're a normal, like super fast, elite Olympic level swimmer, they do it in about 10 hours. And my boat captain talked about like everyone who does this, they're almost all Olympic level, really high end swimmers. I'm not that. I'm like, try to get through make sure I make the time cutoff for the Ironman, try not to drown in the water type swimmer.
Right.
So you start with the 21-mile swim. And then when you get done with that, then it's a 400-mile bike ride. So you end in Palos Verdes, you go through LA, Malibu area, then up and over these mountains. So you have about 20,000 feet of climbing over the 400 miles. And that goes through Death Valley into the Badwater Basin. And then when you finish that, then it's a 135-mile run. And the run is actually a hike. So the swim is a swim, the bike is a bike, the run is a hike. So it's 135-mile, which is 5 marathons back to back, up to the Mount Whitney portals. And that has about
tallest mountain in the continental United States, right?
The tallest mountain in the continental US, yes.
Because why not?
Yeah, why not? So it takes about a week. So it's always nice when you do a sporting event where you start clean shaven and when you finish, you have a beard. Like that's
Right. Forrest Gump.
fun sports.
So when you're doing an event like this, when do you sleep?
So I had that, and that's a great question, and that's what a lot of people ask. And when I did Solo Race Across America, that's what I was wondering. Like, how do you sleep? How do you do this? Because I knew I needed to be on the bike at least 20 hours a day. So Race Across America is really where I fine-tuned my sleep schedule, and I understood what the human body and mind does when they're put under extreme stress situations like this. Yep. So for me, I kind of knew what I was getting into. On this, I usually go the first day and a half straight, and then my body lets me sleep for about an hour and a half, and I wake up wide awake. And then I try to sleep between, somewhere between 10 p.m. and 2 is I'll try to find a place to go down, and I'll sleep an hour and a half, get right back up and keep moving. And then I'll go to the following night and then sleep about an hour and a half and then keep moving. And then on day 3 or 4, usually I'll have to take another little micro nap. So you might nap like 15 minutes to an hour and a half. But you just sleep when your body won't let you go any further. And it's amazing how you'll wake up like 15 minutes, 45 or an hour and a half later, just wide awake, ready to go. So you shift into a different mindset. Like stuff changes. You function almost as a different person when you're in these races than when you do a normal life.
And how many people, how many people competed in this event and how many people finished?
So I was the 7th official finisher in the history of the event. So this event, this year, there was one other girl who did a modified Uberman. So she did the swim in a pool and then a little modified bike route. And then she ended up getting pretty bad blisters on the Badwater route. So she pulled about 32 miles into it. I think her name's Susan Hayes. I met her afterwards. She's great. But it's like, your body breaks down on it. So I was the only official finisher this year. And then there was a relay team. This girl, Catherine, did the swim. James Lawrence, who's the Iron Cowboy, he's the guy that did the 50-50-50, the 50 Ironmen, 50 states in 50 days. He did the bike section, and then
your face, Grant.
And then they had a friend, his buddy Casey, did the run section. So he did the bike in like 28 hours. The cat did the swim in 10 hours, and the marathoner or the Badwater 135 guy, I think he did it in like 35 hours. They broke the relay team record by like 40 hours. Like they just crushed it.
That's
amazing. And so it was great to see them on the course and be able to kind of, have that friendly banter back and forth where they were just having fun and I was exhausted.
Yeah, you're dying at that point. Well, Rob, one of the things I want to talk about with you here or bring up, because I think this is underpins who you are as a person. And I love this. You said it's a 21-mile swim from Catalina Island. So you've got all of the currents to deal with. You've got tides, and I don't know how fast the current rips through there, but you're fighting that because over a 21 miles, I would guess you were probably at 24 hour mark of that swim. Is that fair?
It took me 25 hours. Yeah.
Okay. Listen, look at how well Paul knows his friend Rob. So 25 hours. And you actually were not able to complete it the first round. There was some inclement weather, some issues that prevented you from continuing, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so basically, I don't know if it was you who made the call or one of your crew that made the call, but said, let's keep going. And so you get out of the water, and I'm sure at this point, feeling overwhelmed by a sense of, I may not finish this thing, right? Mm-hmm. And at that point, you have some choices. You can say, I'm going to continue and finish the rest of it, or I'm going to quit and start a different time. Mm-hmm. But you decided to continue, and I'm just going to skip over that essentially last 4 hours of swim, and who knows, right? And that had to feel pretty. When you were facing an endurance event, that had to feel pretty at a low point. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the swim, going into the swim, that's the thing I wrestled with all year as I was getting up for it. I wasn't able to train as much as I had planned on because of the COVID issues, but even if I had trained as much as I had, it would have been a very similar scenario. So my lack of training didn't affect it much. But I got to the point about a month out where I was like, I became at peace with it. And it's one of those, I'm afraid of the dark. I don't like deep water. I know there's animals in it. Like there's all these things that I was like, I just want to pass through this as gracefully as possible and I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I'm just not going to stop. And I just have this feeling I'm going to find a way to get through it. So I started the swim at like 8:55 at night. You swim at night because the winds are less. And about a half an hour into it, there's just chop. And it wasn't terrible, but it was just enough where it's like you're getting punched with the waves and you're just like bam, bam, bam. And to the point where like I had this open water cap and I was like, man, it's just uncomfortable. I want to take this off. So I took it off. I'm such a poor swimmer. I don't even know what an ocean water cap is for. Do you know what it's for? It's like a helmet. As soon as I took it off, I'm seasick within like 3 minutes. I'm just getting pummeled in the waves. And so I'm like, give me my cap back. And so I put it back on. And so it was 6 hours of chop. And it's just enough where you can't get a normal swim stroke. So you're raising your arm higher. So then my arm's fatigued. I have like an arm strain. So when it finally calms down, like I just don't have the speed I normally do. And I'm slower anyways. But it's just slow and steady, keep going. I got through the night. In the morning was one of the super low points. I got in the morning and usually that's the high point. And I'm looking back at the island and the island's bigger than the mainland. And I was supposed to be about 16 miles into it. And I got on the boat every 3 hours for like 5 minutes to grab food and then back in the water. We're allowed to do that on this event. And so I got back in the boat and I was like, how far have we gone? And the captain's like, we're almost halfway. And so instead of being at the 16-mile mark, I'm at like the 10-mile mark. And I'm like, this isn't going well. And but the captain was like, we're out here as long as you want to be here and your crew's going to stay. And so it's like, and I was like, all right, let's do this. And so to get back in that mindset of like, instead of thinking it's 16 to 18 hours, like recognizing this is going to be a full day or if not more. So I got back in the water and pushed through the day. We got into the night and I started to, right before it was about 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So I've been in the water about 19 hours. I started to feel, I'd go to take a breath and you take a breath and then you'd look down and all of a sudden I'd hear this pop, pop. And then I'd go to take a breath and then I look down and I'd hear this pop, pop. And I was like, what is that? And I'd been getting salt water kind of flushing down the back of my throat. And my throat was kind of constricting. It was my pulse against my throat. And I was noticing I was having to stop a little to take more breaths because I was getting winded because I wasn't getting as much oxygen. So I was like, it's okay now, but it's like, I need to watch this for later. And then after a 3-hour pretty aggressive push, I got back in the boat for a few minutes and it was that same look I got from the crew. And I was like, and when it started the 3 hours, I was 5 miles away. And so I thought we were going to be 2 to 3 miles from shore. And I was like, how close are we? And they're like, over those 3 hours, I'd covered 0.72 miles. And the thing is, I swim so slow. I'm about a mile and a half an hour. So if I have a mile an hour current pushing me out, I'm hardly moving at all. And that's what happened. I wasn't able to push the current, where a normal swimmer that, this like Olympic level, like they go at about 2 to 2.5 miles an hour. So if they have like a mile back current, it affects them, but they're still going forward at like a mile and a half, where me, I'm just standing still. And so I talked to the captain and I was like, is there a chance that the tide will shift anytime in the next 6 hours? And he's like, it looks like it should shift within the next hour. So I was like, let's take an hour off. I'll take a nap and then jump back in the water. So I jumped back in the water an hour later and I was in the water about 10 to 15 minutes. And, my throat was even worse than it was before. And I looked up at the captain and he just kind of shook his head. So over that time, I hadn't made any forward progress. So that's when we called it, when it was like, safety wise, I was still okay, but I wanted to conserve. And then just logistically, it just didn't make sense. We weren't going to keep going forward. And it's one of those, the crew, as an athlete, like the crew expects you to push it right to that edge, but not over. Like nobody wants to see the athlete in the emergency room taking off. And so for me, it's like, this is the right call at this moment. And that's part of being an ultra athlete, is like knowing when to call it. And so I feel good regardless of how the rest of the event was going to turn out. Like that was the right moment.
Well, and this is for people watching, listening, like this is like 3 weeks ago. We're not talking about like a long time ago. Like this is you 3 weeks ago. Should I, drown here in the ocean? I mean, that was kind of the taking to continue. But so you called the swimming event at that point. And again, there's some feelings like, oh man, I'm sure you were feeling big feelings at that point. Mm-hmm. You continued, you pushed on, you got on your bike, and you have an incumbent bike, and you rode 400 miles straight.
Yeah, so I remember coming. So I decided to go to shore, and my plan was to go right to the bike, but because of the way the swim turned out, I was like, let's just give the crew and everyone a night's sleep, see if I can get a good night's sleep. So I got to shore around 9, went to bed at 10, and I woke up wide awake at like 11:30 and just lay there through the night. We decided to start at 9 a.m. around 9 a.m. the next morning. And basically because, I came for the whole event. So I was like, whatever happens, you just go on to the next thing. And we're doing this massive fundraiser for fighting human trafficking. So it's like, it really doesn't matter how it turns out. You just have to be out there and kind of push forward, and whatever happens, you take it as it comes, and you adapt and, and figure out a way to keep going. So yeah, I got on the bike, and then I started biking, and by far the easiest 400-mile bike ride I've ever done, because the swim was that miserable, and it was just such a comparison. I was so uncomfortable.
400-mile ride.
Yeah. The only bummer on the bike, I fell asleep on the second day, middle of the afternoon. I noticed myself starting to fade, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of flagging a little. And then probably like 10 minutes later, I'm sitting there. All of a sudden I wake up, and I'm about 6 inches to a foot off the cement. And I'm like, oh, crap. And you're like, and sliced up my side of my hip, my knee. I banged my ankle. So I ended up spraining my ankle, which is the only huge bummer.
Well, I remember being up at Malibu with you, the Young Life camp up in Canada, where we were sharing a cabin with Ray Brock, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember Ray telling us stories about him riding across, I think it was Canada, and falling asleep at the bike, and me just going, I don't even know how you do that. Now you have one of those stories, so that's good.
Yeah. I've fallen asleep on a bike before. I never crashed when I was asleep.
Well, that's good. I mean,
yeah, that's not to be repeated.
So then you go and do a 135-mile run/hike up Mount Whitney, the tallest peak in North America, at least in the continental United States.
In the continental.
Always taller.
In the continental or the contiguous? Now our fans
contiguous.
Yeah, because Denali is higher.
Yeah,
and that's continental United States. So
my apologies, Chris. I know you like to be accurate.
There are certain things I like to be accurate about, and that's one of them. So I'm glad I was able to straighten that out.
So you push and push and push and get to the very top of Whitney. And at that point, I mean, no small undertaking, but at that point you say to the race director, I want to keep going. Right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it hit me in the middle of the bike ride. I think it was the end of the first day. I realized, I was like, I bet you I could reach out to the race director, and I think he'd let me finish it. So I reached out to one of my coaches, Jody Allman, and I called her, and I was like, I think I'm supposed to finish the swim. And I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody. Like, I still have 2 big monsters in front of me, but I was like, let me process this. I was like, but I think I'm supposed to finish it. So I got into the run, and literally the run, like after the sprained ankle, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to walk. So I went out to start it. And as I'm moving, within a couple miles, the pain level drops, and it's just pressure. So it was like a lateral sprain. So it didn't affect me moving forward. So I was like, thank goodness. And then it was in the middle of the run. I did the first big climb. There's 3 big climbs on the Battle Royale 135 course. So it's about 18,000 feet of climbing. And at the top of the big one, I talked to, the crew, because the race director was supposed to come out on the course. And I was like, is he coming out? And they're like, oh, he had something come up. He's not going to come out here. And I was like, man, how am I going to do this? And I realized I had a couple of videographers there. And so I pulled one of the videographers aside and talked to him and gave him this, I basically recorded, can you record this message? And I recorded it and then had him give it to my wife to send to Dan Burku, the race director. And so we went down the next hill, and, and about 4 hours later, I was there with Adam Scully Powers, who's the reigning champion for Uberman. He paced me for 3 days. And we got down there, and I got this text, and I saw the absolutely at the top. And so I was like, Adam, can you read this? So I had the videographer record it, and he reads the message from Dan Burku saying absolutely, it'll count. As soon as you're done, go back to LA, have him drop you off in the water right where you left. It'll be official. I'll be there on the shore with the hammer, and I'll see you there. And so for me, it was like, we're back in the race. I can finish this thing. It's back to, it's like nothing, it's like I found a way to get through it. I mean, I still had a lot in front of me. So from there, the battle ride took me about 3 days. So on the third day, the first day, it was 105 degrees. It was supposed to be 90. It was way hotter in Furnace Creek. But my body kept cool. I kept ice on me. The third day, it was probably 90. And all of a sudden in the middle of the day, I just started flagging. My pulse started racing, and I was like, I'm in trouble. I was in distress. So I was like, I need to stop. And thankfully we had our RV about 1.5 miles. So I made it to the RV, took a cold shower, turned the AC on, and I sat there for 2 hours. I wasn't tired, so I just called people and talked to them and got that positive kind of vibe. And about an hour and a half into it, I could feel my pulse drop back down to normal. So it was funny. I called my buddy Adrian, who's a postal carrier, and he was like, at the post office, we get hot, you go home and you take 3 days off. My crazy buddy Rob, he waits for his pulse to drop down, then he goes and runs a marathon because I still had a marathon right in front of me. So so I got that. Finished out the Badwater 135. We finished at the Whitney Portal, which is, I think it's like 8,600 feet. The plan was to go to the summit, but because of all the fires, they closed down the parks. We did everything we possibly could to get access, but they just wouldn't let it. I felt stronger this time than I did 2 years ago when I did the 146. So I'm confident I could have finished it, but this year I had a swim to do. So so that's when we kind of went down, had a breakfast with Badwater Ben because we finished at 5 a.m. So Badwater Ben's this legend. It's kind of like on Star Wars, going out and finding Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert. Like that's Badwater Ben to me. He's just like this grandmaster, like amazing character. So to have that time with him and then to head down for the swim was really special.
Well, and again, I think it's such an amazing story that I don't think until people hear Rob tell it that they can get it. So you go back to LA, you hop in the water and you swim out the 5 miles that you have left, and it takes about 4 hours. So that's right on pace with what you normally do. Mm-hmm. And you finish.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And the swim, like everyone's, it's just 4 miles. Like the swim's easy. That was the second hardest physical day of my life, like physical, mental day of my life. And the reason was I'd had such little sleep and your body's so beat up. I went down there and, one of my good friends, Gareth Evans, he was one of the 2 kayakers. So it's Gareth and then Tor. Tor is a Navy SEAL. Gareth, he's the CEO of Vecta, this company I work with. So he comes down, he had kayaked with me, and then he was telling my wife, he's like, I want to kayak him in. She's like, you can't, we're going on this like 23-foot inflatable boat. Like you can't kayak. He's like, I want to kayak. And she was like, you can't kayak, but you can swim. So he comes in his wetsuit. He'd done Ironman in the past, but he hadn't swam, I think, in years. So
right.
we jump on the boat at 4 a.m. We go out, we hit the water around 5. It's like complete black. It's foggy. Like this is as like special forces as civilians get. And we just like flip off the boat into the water. And he swam with me the whole freaking way back. Yeah. And for me, like, I have a better appreciation for this, and I'm still trying to process it. But I used to call it like bad time. My mechanic Jamaica calls it hero's work. You can call it flagging, but it's basically where your spirit kind of separates from your body. Like when you're swimming, you're so exhausted that you're just not there. Like 1,000-yard stare, you're checked out. So that happened to me. And as soon as that happened, you lose all time reference. So 5 minutes might as well be an hour or a week. Like you're basically lost in eternity. So I spent about half of those 4 hours like lost in La La Land. And I did the first like one and it happened and I was like, holy crap. And I finally got back in my skull and I got back in the boat and I like jacked up on as much caffeine as I felt like safety wise I could do. So like 3 cups of coffee, a Coke, 2 caffeine pills. I jumped back in the water and that kept me good for like a half an hour. And then all of a sudden I'm like flagging again. And I finally get close to shore. And I remember I was like 15 minutes out and it's so foggy, you can't see the shoreline. And I'm looking at Gareth and I was like, are we like 4 or 5 miles out? Are we there? And he's like, no, we're almost there. And so I'm like, I got to stop. Like, I'm not here. And the boat captain's like, no, just one more push. So I push up on shore. I finally land and I'm talking to people. And all of a sudden I realized like they're recording me. And I was like, I'm not here. And so I've watched the video lately because I've never, a few times because I'd never got it on film. And I'm like, give me a second to gather my thoughts. And I take a deep breath and I go like this and you can see like my, kind of your essence come back into me. And then my voice changes and I'm back. And so it was so good to like, just be there, to be cognizant, engaging with the Rotarians and all the people that came down. And it was just such a powerful experience.
The video's on Facebook. I know it's there. What do people search for on Facebook to find that?
Yeah, so if you just go to my account, the Robert Decoux, my Facebook account, and then it's the live video back on, when was it? It was Friday morning, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and you think it's okay to post that on the Twitter so people watch it?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, so the question on everybody's mind, I'm sure at this point, certainly on my mind, is why? Why would anybody do that to themselves? It doesn't sound fun. It doesn't sound enjoyable. So why would anybody do that?
Yeah. And I think the answer's grown on me over the years, and I can give a better answer now than I've ever been able to do. I used to tell people, like, one of my superpowers is I suffer well. Like, I'm very comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And I usually say that and people kind of blow out. I was like, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. They're like, oh yeah, we all are. I was like, no, like, you can throw me in the middle of like very distressful situations, and I'm very stable in that. And so that's great, but that's not a great power to have. Like, that really sucks that's you kind of continue to put yourself into those. One of the other things I realized more on this, I'm able to rally around some of the most powerful, empathetic, just kind, generous people in the world and pull them into my circles around these events. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm able to connect people and to have them come on and have shared experiences where they connect afterwards. And it just builds out all of our network around these just incredible, vibrant people that we run through this like very high intense situation. So you have these like close knit bonds. And I was like, oh yeah, I love that I'm able to bring around those communities and then continue and engage with them afterwards. So I was like, that is one of the amazing things of these events. The other one on a personal level, I used to say in the middle of ultras is when I'm the most alive. And it reminds me a lot of wrestling. So I used to wrestle. Like, wrestling is where I got gritty. And we used to always say, like, after wrestling, everything's easy. And still, like, wrestling, when you're in that third period where you're absolutely exhausted, nothing works on you. Nothing I've found has that intensity of pain. Like, still nothing's as hard as wrestling. But ultras are close. So when I get out there, you pass through an experience like this, and you make a decision not to stop. And once you make that decision, there's only one path forward, and it doesn't matter how hard it gets. You just move forward, whether that's swimming, biking, running. You really have one choice in front of you, and you just have to stay in that mindset for about a week on this one. But it's one of those, as you're going through that, it's, if I was like a good way, like, you guys are gamers. If you're playing a video game and your character's on like level 10, if you pass through an experience like this, all of a sudden you just get leveled up to like 20 or 25. So you're on such a different plane of existence. And it's like, I'm a different person right now than I was a month ago. And the skills and the ability and the focus and that carries over to the rest of my life. So because I do this makes me a better business leader. It makes me a better husband. It makes me a better father. And even after the events, like, the business interactions I've had, like, there's this clarity and this decisiveness where it's like, I'm better at this because I'm able to make those decisions under stress and in these very high risk scenarios and you're comfortable taking on risks that otherwise, like, there's like, oh, I don't want to do that. What if I fail? And for me, it's like, no, you start and you move forward and you find a way and you adapt purposefully through the process. So for me, like, the ultras are kind of a testing ground. That's safe for me, and then I apply those same things in my business and in other aspects of my life.
Well, I want to talk about your business, but before we get there, I want to sort of light the candle on this a little bit, because you asked why, Chris. I want to talk a little bit about the money that you raised, because you've done a really fantastic job tying outcome. I mean, and it has to do with your own integrity and how principled you are. I mean, I've known you a long time. And I know that, and that's part of why, like, let's talk about the things that matter, right? Because that's what we do. That's what Chris and I sort of started this thing was, let's talk about the real life. You figured out how to take these endurance events and translate that into helping folks. Can you talk about that for a second, Rob?
Yeah. In a lot of my process, because I work with a lot of different people, and I realize some people like research stuff to find the information. The way that I learn is by being around people and mentors. And so if I have a problem, like, the first answer is like, oh, let me talk to this friend, or let me pull this person in. And so what I've done with the ultras and with fundraising, I tried to raise money early on in my life, and you spend so much time and energy, and you end up making between like $2 to $10 an hour for the time you put in. It's just this massive amount of effort. And then it's just this heartbreak that's like, man, do people not care? Am I not doing it right? And so what I did was I started looking at my mentors and trying to find people who are the people doing this well, how are they doing it? And I was looking for guys, for people, men and women, but basically they were family guys that had a business and they were having this impact. And then I just reached out to them and talked to them and started asking questions. And then I modeled best practices. You're like, how do you do this? What were those kind of key factors? And I found a lot of the critical pieces for the fundraising was find an organization that's already moving in that direction. So whether that's 3,000 Miles to a Cure, which is what I did for Race Across America, they have a system, they're raising money for brain cancer research. I had a friend that passed away of brain cancer, so I had a story to connect it with. Pitch that, get out there, share your heart, and then raise the funds. And it was like, that was the first one that I was like, man, there's this, people got drawn into that. I was like, I think this is a formula where you're authentic in what you're doing and people get connected with that. The following year, I ended up doing the Badwater 146, and we raised over $700,000 for polio, and just this massive number. And the thing there is like, Rotary District 5280, they already have the mechanisms, they raise money for polio, they have the system set up. So I'm just creating an event to draw people's attentions in and to get them focused on it. They had the 2-to-1 matching grant with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So whatever we did was magnified. And so that just like knocked it out of the park. So recognizing like when you can get access to grant, when you can get access to matching grants, any of those type things. And then this one, it was like tying into organizations where it's like they're already raising money and awareness. So whether that's Hope 61, In Our Backyard, or 1736, which were the 3 organizations I tied in with. And then you just engage with their leadership. It's like, hey, I want to do this, and focus the attention, and then make sure you guys keep all the donor lists and all that stuff. Like, I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to create something that's kind of plug and play that you can access to, to highlight for your donor base. And I like that approach, and it's been fun to partner with the organizations.
Well, and it's been incredibly successful on each front. I mean, I remember when you were doing this event, and I looked in and I was like, he's at 40 grand already. Good for him. I mean, that's, to me, that's inspiring, right? Like in the midst of COVID, in the midst of people losing their jobs, in the midst of families and, all of the things that everyone's going through right now, you're offering some hope, right? Some purpose that they can get behind, and they're putting their money behind it too. And that's so encouraging.
Well, what I think is interesting, Rob, is I mean, there's clearly 2 fires burning very brightly inside of you, driving you. One is to push your body to its absolute, utter extreme of endurance, and 2, to raise money for people who need it. And what I think is so interesting is you found a way to marry these 2 things in a way that makes them both that much, I don't know, the outcome's better in both areas. It gives you a reason to push your body, and it gives you, and you're able to give back. I mean, did that just happen, or was there a plan there?
I mean, it's kind of like anything, you're just testing it, and you're just doing iterations, and you're trying to get it to work, and you go through a lot of failures. Like the fascinating thing about ultras is people who have known me for the last 4 or 5 years, they're like, man, Rob always finishes these things. He knocks it out of the park. He's so consistent. They don't see the 15 years of, man, I DNF'd on this course. I didn't make this. I didn't make my time cutoffs. Part of this year, like I went back to the Race Across America or Race Across Oregon course because I DNF'd on it 10 years ago. And the Leadville course that Paul's talking about, the first time I did it, I made it the halfway point and missed the time cutoff. So there was all of these failures along the way that I had to adapt and figure out different strategies and then come back and overcome. So they don't see those like 15 years of buildup to get to the point where it's like, oh man, now he's got it dialed in. So anytime I do a fundraising campaign, they're like, oh, I just want to, I just do that and duplicate it and I'll fit right in there. It's like, well, yes, but it's going to take you about 10 years of kind of iterating or figuring it out or making sure that you have stuff. The other thing,
I'll pile on as soon as you're done, Rob.
I'm still trying to figure out how to get my business tied in with it. So I want to have like the profit end of it, and then doing a lot of the stuff where basically I just do it at cost to highlight the stuff that I'm doing, and then other people that are doing things for good. Because it's like I have access to these incredible creatives. Like, let's just use them. And I was like, I'll just pay them and not take any markup or anything, but just make sure we get the content out there. So I'm working with my wife on that in the next few years. Like, how can we make like do what we're doing and kind of duplicate that with other people, so they don't have to go through the same learning curve that I do, but you kind of move them along that spectrum.
So
Right.
I want to pile on here about, I know you're a humble guy, and one of the reasons I love you, right? Like when I want to, you're talking about the 10 or 15 years leading up to it. So part of that was time that we had together. So you were a young life leader in Port Angeles, where you're currently living.
Mm-hmm.
And I was young life leader in Port Townsend, area director, right? And we took kids from the Olympic Peninsula to a camp down in Central Oregon called Washington Family Ranch, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were at the time paying for life by working at the prison as a substitute teacher on top of that. At the prison, you were teaching entrepreneurial skills. You had started a baking program. So these sort of violent offenders were learning to make cinnamon rolls, right? And you had figured out a way to sell these cinnamon rolls and different types of bread so that it could fund their own program and give them some life skills so that when they got out, they had a chance. You were also a substitute teacher in the Port Angeles School District because that's who you are. You want to help young people. And then we go to camp, right? And camp, I mean, I would say it's probably on par with the endurance events that you're talking about, right? I mean, not quite, but there's a lot asked of people, right? So you're up until 2:00 in the morning, jumping into the pool with your clothes on and doing all this crazy, stupid stuff to connect with young people. At the same time, it's 100 degrees outside, a crazy hot Oregon desert, and there's Rob climbing the mountain. Like, he's like, how much time we got? I got 3 hours. Okay, I'm going to do the mountain 3 or 4 times. And so we're on the deck eating ice cream. We're like, there goes Rob again, right? Because that was the thing, is like that 10 to 15 years, all of that time that led up to this moment is what made it so that you could do this, right?
Yeah.
There you go. I told you I was going to pile on. I did. But I also want to talk about, how do we tie your business in? How do we bring more? We have a huge watching and listening audience, Rob.
Oh, huge.
Enormous.
and they all want to know, what is your business?
Yeah, talk about that for a second. I want to make sure.
Yeah, so I've been running Lux Virtual for the last 6 years now, coming up on 7. So we started as an animation studio. So basically, I moved to Los Angeles when I got married and came out of teaching. I'd done a lot of entrepreneurship, so building up programs from within. And this was my first large-scale entrepreneurship venture. My wife's best friend, her husband used to work in Hollywood, so he did a lot of the animation for movie trailers. So think of like Marvel movie trailers, stuff like that. The cuts on those, so very high-end animation. So we started as an animation studio. Basically, the idea was to explain complex ideas. So engineering, science, biotech. We spent the first 2 years trying to sell what we were doing and realizing like engineers don't have money. It was a very poor product market fit, but we were so passionate about it and we built so many good relationships that we started getting some traction. So pretty soon we started doing projects with like McGilvery Freeman that does IMAX productions. We worked with Hyperloops. We were able to do their animation for their train. We got some national attention working with Metro. I went after the government sector because I'd worked in government agencies. And so I knew how to fill out paperwork, which is mind numbing, but I don't mind and I'm persistent.
Yes,
so
it is.
we had one of the Safetyville campaigns that got picked up on the Today Show. They were talking about how effective it was. So that really kind of catapulted us as like, oh, these guys really care about the science and engineering and the, that they're explaining complex ideas, and explainer videos were kind of our bread and butter. So that 45-second to minute 15. And then the last 3 years, I ended up buying out my business partner. We're still really good friends. He's up in San Francisco, working in the Google offices, doing like running teams of creatives. And we shifted into kind of VR, AR. So we do a lot of virtual reality, augmented reality. And then when COVID hit, we actually shifted into working as an external marketing company. So we basically do the marketing function like we're an internal team. And then we handle everything from their creative strategy to blog posts to their social media campaigns. And for me, it's like, well, you're kind of all over the place. But my role is, as an entrepreneur, I basically do business development. So I find the clients, make sure it's the right price point, price fit, quality fit. And then I pull together the strike team of creatives. And so I make sure like, what's the best team we can pull together? And I pull together that niche team. And then we just focus on that company or whatever the project is. So my role is to work on the company, not in the company. So finding the clients and finding the right creatives. And it's just been the last 2 years where I've really been able to find that kind of synchronicity where it's like, man, my role as the executive producer, and I've never, in the beginning, like you feel like an imposter, like I'm not an executive producer. What does that even mean? And and now this year, like as I'm doing like my 20th or 30th animation, I'm like, oh yeah, even though I don't work on any aspect of it, I find the client, I set the price point, I write the contracts, I pull together the creatives, I set the timeline. We get the final, I deliver the final to the client, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a producer. That's what a producer does. So all of a sudden I kind of fell into this role, and just by doing it and continuing to iterate over the years, and just like ultras, like making sure that you're doing it with the highest level of competency so that you're delivering and able to perform. I kind of fell into it. It's like, man, we do this better than almost everyone else. And it's fun, and I love working with friends, and I love building those teams. So it's been just a really good fit. And putting together the creative teams is very similar to how I put together my crews for ultras. It's just like, who are the best guys with the best skill sets for this, and let's pull them all together and have fun. And
so producer David, I hope you're taking notes on what real producers do. But so, I mean, it sounds like your company is in many ways like a movie production company. And I don't mean because you make movies or you make shorts, but movies are producers like yourself, go out and hire people for that project. And then it's done and they go back and they get hired for their next project. That's what it sounds like in many ways your company is. It's not like you have a huge staff of creatives, but rather you have all of these people that you have worked with in the past, their talents. And as you said, you assemble them for a project, and then everybody goes back to their neutral corner after that.
Yeah. And one of the big things that's been super helpful for me is like, I find mentors in the industry, and especially when you find producers like Brady Connell, if I have like a new project that I've never done, I shoot him a text. I'm like, hey, can I talk? And he's like, hey, I got 10 minutes on my drive. So I'll talk to him in 10 minutes and run through the scenarios. Like, do you know how to price it? Do you know some people I can talk to? Do you know anyone in the industry? And if I end up feeling like it's the right fit, I'll like, okay, I can handle this. And but that insight from somebody who's been in the industry for 20 years is priceless for someone like me getting into it. And so that's been good, kind of finding those mentors. I've also found if you treat the creatives extremely well, because a lot of my guys, they're only available little bits of time. If they're not available, they'll refer you to their friends. And if you find someone who you like, you trust, they're competent, and they have integrity, they surround themselves by other people that are like-minded. So anyone they refer tends to have that same skill set. So that's how I built out a lot of my network is, when they're not available, I'll use their network, and then I'll always let them know, like, you guys are the first one I'm going to come back to, but we need someone to cover the project. And so it's just over the years just gets bigger and bigger.
Okay. So talk about what your ideal customer is. Because if somebody here is listening and they're like, man, I love this dude. He is my type of people, which lots of people will. I mean, not just watching, but you know what I mean? Like, your story is a powerful story and people will be drawn. So if they're sitting here, they're like, I'd love to use this guy and his company, Lux
Virtual.
Thank you.
Easy for you to say, Paul.
What's your ideal customer?
It's interesting because I've actually just this last year I've started to run into some of my ideal customers. I call them my A customers, but the main client I'm working with right now, Vecta, they're just a dream client. It's they're a funded startup, so they have resources. They're just in that growth phase, so I can grow with them and we can kind of scale and help through that process. And then also like the CEO Gareth, at first we were just working together and have quickly become friends with him. It reminds me he handles his company very similar to the way I do. So it feels like I can read him really well, where it's like he cares about his people, he pays them well, he cares about their health, he cares that they're sustainable and growing and that they're doing something good in the world. And he gives them that, and it's weird to say, but that freedom to fail. And it's the opportunity to take a risk. And if it doesn't turn out the way that it's supposed to, like, you can iterate. And so they can try new things. And then if it doesn't work, they just change it. He's like, just change it, try something different. And so those are those kind of companies that they want you to try a bunch of different stuff and grow. And he's been awesome.
So startup that kind of knows what they're doing, that is funded, who needs help with their marketing.
Help with their marketing. And whether that's to social media marketing, blog posts, videos, animation,
marketing, email marketing, all of the above fits under your umbrella.
Yeah. Another one that we're not doing right now, but I have this incredible VR AR team that I could literally put on a project. My main creative director, strategist on it used to work for the Department of Defense. So if there's anyone in the audience that wants a VR AR build out, like, we're like standing by, ready to go. But right now we're just jamming on the marketing stuff and the animated videos.
It's coming, Rob, I believe. Well, one thing that we do as part of our show, we kind of wrap it up this way, and I can't thank you enough for sharing and us getting to share your
Paul,
story.
wait, before we go there, I just have one last question, because you talked about Young Life, and a lot of people may who are listening or watching may not be familiar with Young Life, but it's a Christian organization, faith-based organization. And what I wanted to ask Rob, clearly your faith, and we don't wade deeply into religion in the show necessarily, but I think that's a big part of you, and I don't want to let that go by. I mean, you say, faith, I think, is the foundation upon which everything you do is built. The desire to raise money, the desire to push your body. So if you could just talk a minute about that, if I'm not putting you on the spot, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, no, and that gets kind of at the root of it. So for me, I always kind of tell people, if you want to understand me, like, just understand, like, I overdo everything. I was wired with a fanatic personality. So whether I direct that at something good or something negative, I'm going to overdo it. And so thankfully I found my faith at about 13 years old. And it was just kind of that transition. It was like, I want to focus my energy on good. And whenever something bad comes along, I want to, like, get it under control as soon as I can, so that I can focus on how can I make a difference? How can I have an impact? And so that process kind of started at 13. And then I found Rotary at 14. I was a Rotary International exchange student over in India. And then I came back. Like, when I was in India, I read the Bible 3 times. I read every spiritual book I could, stayed with some Hindu, some Muslim families. So I love world religions and spirituality. But I come from a Christian background and Christian kind of faith center. So for me, like, the Young Life group, I loved them because it's like, I view them as at-risk kids. They're super high energy. They're fanatic, just like me. And if you direct their energy at positive things, these kids are going to be game changers. But they also have that potential, if they don't get on the right track, like, they're going to be menaces. So I love that, the work that people do with Young Life students. And that's why I fit in so well in that scenario. And also kind of the prison environment. I think the reason I do so well in there is there's a lot of students that, they get in there and it's basically like they got involved in the drug culture. They got kind of off track and did these crimes and stuff. But as soon as you pull the drug culture out of them and you give them a job, like, these guys can do amazing things. And so I see that same aspect to them, where it's like, if you get them on the right track and you get them out of those negative environments, they're going to be fine. They're going to be contributors to society. There's a section of them that are, it's like, man, these guys are really, they're going to struggle no matter what happens. And I probably wouldn't want to see them back out there, but there's a whole lot of them that's like, if you give them the resources and funnel them in a good direction, they're going to be awesome. And so I love catching them before that, like the Young Life kids. Not that Young Life kids are going to go to prison, but
I was going to say, like, I was a Young Life kid. I didn't know I was at risk. Wow.
But it's like, these are the kids these can be game changers. These are the kids that can make so much impact. And so I love being around them, engaging with them, telling them stories, kind of getting them excited. And for me, the ultras, like you hinted to, I mean, it's a spiritual thing for me. Like, I want to see how far, like, and how your body, your mind, and your spirit interact. And the thing about Uber, man, I felt this way on Race Across America. About a third of the way through it, all of a sudden I felt this, like, just protection around me. And it was like, I felt like I had these angel armies guarding me, and you're in this bubble of protection. And I felt that from the beginning on Uberman. So it was like, I knew I was going to get through it. I knew I was going to be safe. And once you get in that mindset, like, imagine what you could do if you don't have fear.
Right.
Imagine what you could do if all you need to do is move forward and trust that the world's going to conspire for your good to make it happen. And so for me, I was like, all I needed to do was get in the water, start swimming, and just keep moving forward. And I knew that the world would conspire for our goodness to find a way through it. And when you're in that headspace, like, how can you fail? It's, you know, and regardless of what scenarios run out, like, you find a way to maneuver through it, and you find a way to, to create your own story. And
Yep. Great stuff.
Yeah,
Great stuff.
it is good stuff. So Rob, we usually end the show with a little thing we like to call
The lightning round, where we will give you 5 words one at a time. And we want you to say the first thing that comes to your head. It's a sort of psychological evaluation of you.
Okay. We're judging you.
Yeah, we're judging you. And there's answers that as over time it's evolved, where there are answers that I expect to hear. And when I don't hear that, I'm going to leap on the answer and dissect your personality, or Paul will. This week, we're doing the Ultra Endurance Athlete edition of the lightning round. So we are making it. So that ought to be. It's like that ought to give you a hint of what we're looking for. So, all right, the first word, taco.
gigantic.
Okay, not off to a good start, but okay.
Not off to a good start.
Not off to a good start. No. Bandit.
Zorro.
Oh, okay. Hammer.
And scalpel.
Maytagged.
Washer.
Listen, I did a whole lot of research on terminology of ultra athletes, and I'm right now I'm very upset. Last one, squirrel.
Dog.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Tell them what the correct answers are, Marriott, because I mean, as much as I like Rob DeCoo, I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
I'll point that out. I don't know them either, but
Right. I mean, for example, taco, what I was looking for was that's what you ultra athletes call a banged up bicycle wheel after a bike accident.
Oh yeah. I'm not a cyclist.
All right. Well, but you ride a bike for 400 miles. You're not a cyclist. Bandit is
the runners that go without the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Don't
Yes.
register. I always register. I'm not a.
No, I know. I didn't. Let me. I have to recheck some of my sources to even know what these others are.
What's the hammer? Like hammer down on a bike, like you're.
Yeah, that one was kind of easy. I was very disappointed in that. Maytagged was my favorite. Now, if you think about Maytagged, you know, because you're right, a Maytag is a washer. So for ultra athletic or endurance athletes, what could that apply to? I love this one.
I have no idea.
It's when you're thrown from a whitewater raft and left to your own devices in churning water. You've been Maytagged. Paul loves that one.
Yeah.
And squirrel, I can't even remember. Hold on, let me get back to my source material. Oh, okay. That's a squiggly, nervous, or unstable bike rider who can't be trusted to maintain a steady line.
Yeah.
Oh, see, you didn't even do that. So, anyway, okay. Well, you've redeemed yourself by actually knowing what most of these things were. Maytag, have you ever done whitewater rafting?
Yeah, with Young Life.
Okay, well now, next time you go and somebody gets launched from the raft, you can look really, you can be like the guy who's in the know. You go, oh yeah, he was Maytagged. Did you see when Paul got Maytagged back there?
Well,
Good
Rob,
stuff.
I can't thank you enough. It's good to reconnect even in a public venue like this. You know what I mean? So proud of you for all the things you're doing.
Yep.
Thank you for keeping me in the loop. It's a treasure, even though we live across the country right now, to get to be able to stay connected to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I thank you as well. Great stories of inspiration and endurance. And next time I see Paul get winded going up the stairs, I'm gonna say, what would Rob say?
Right. Well, I'm 1-0 against Rob in a wrestling match. I want to point that out.
That's not surprising. Anyway, thanks again, Rob, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
All right.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Paul.
And we're back.
We're back.
and perhaps producer David's choice of background today. Would you like to explain it? Is there an interpretation that we should be making of this?
No, I did some painting earlier, live this past weekend, and this is just what the wall looks like behind me permanently.
How do we open in YouTube? Oh, what does that say? Well worth the effort. I'm not gonna.
So I was just about to say, is that really? So there, if somebody goes to the effort of actually,
yes, Chris, there is a thing behind a thing. And
there's
Chris,
a subliminal.
If you give too much, if you give too much away, it's gonna ruin it.
I won't. I love how meta producer Dave can be at times.
He is, by which we define meta.
Fabulous episode. We hope you enjoyed that. Rob was awesome and hugely inspirational. So we were very grateful that he spent the time with us today and shared his life and his purpose.
So Chris, I did mention at the end of the episode that I am 1-0 in wrestling against Rob McCool. He is a college wrestler originally, and when he first started leading Young Life with us, I jumped him. I was on a hotel bed. He was walking past. I jumped him, Chris. I knew I was going to lose, and by jumping him, the art of surprise, I was able to get the takedown. And since we were only going to first points wins, I got the victory.
Oh, you know what? I realized when at the end of the episode, I also said, well, when you were talking about Young Life, and I said, well, I was a Young Life, but I actually wasn't. I was Campus Life. Campus Life and Young Life affiliated.
No, they're not affiliated. There's some overlap in terms of mission, but no, they're not affiliated. And I don't know. I mean, kind of a little bit of the topic of this episode, I think, is post show is going to be unity. I think. I mean, it has to be, right? And so, things like Campus Life, Young Life, I do think when we have overlapping missions, how do we figure out a common ground? Did I lose you?
Uh-oh.
I lost Chris. Oh man, how fantastic is that? I lost Chris. It's usually me. You know what I mean? It's usually me that freezes up and everyone's like, what's the deal with Shriner? But it's not today. It's the venerable Chris Marriott.
How embarrassing.
Well, producer David Inman. Now we can have that conversation we've been long wanting to have.
Finally.
Seriously. Have you voted yet?
I did vote. I voted early last week.
Okay, you voted early last week. Is that so? How long was your line that you waited in?
It was almost exactly 45 minutes, which is exactly what I expected.
You expected a 45-minute wait?
That's kind of what I'd heard from everyone around here. Well, what about you? Well, no, you didn't early vote, did you?
I voted by mail. There was a checkbox on the application that said, "Are you concerned about COVID-19?" And that's all you had to check, and you got a mail-in ballot. I was like, I am concerned about COVID-19. And that meant that I didn't have to wait in line for 45 minutes. Although, from what I understand across the country, there's a lot of energy standing in line, and it's a cool thing to be a part of. So what was your experience like? Was there energy there, or was it just like standing in line?
That's a good question. The day that we went, it was raining pretty hard. So there wasn't a ton of, morale wasn't super high, but there was just kind of, that excitement that I was feeling, and just everyone was we were just ready to do our thing,
A buzz. Would you say there was a buzz about standing in line for your vote?
Buzz is exactly the word I would use.
Wait a minute. You guys went on with the show without me?
Well, what should we do, Marriott? So all we've talked about to catch you up is David told us about his waiting in line to vote experience. He voted early last week. That's all.
Well, good. I didn't miss anything important. What I was going to talk, and I don't know what happened. I guess it was my connection. But what I was started to say before we got into Unity was I want to give our audience a further lesson in what we in the business call continuity. And you've heard producers and I talk about continuity before. And continuity is, when you stop filming one day and then pick up filming the next, the person in charge of continuity makes sure that everything looks the same, that the actors and actresses look the same, have the same, everything's the same, so that somebody watching the final product doesn't realize that these were done on different days. So we recorded Rob yesterday, and after we recorded Rob, I got a haircut. So my plan was that I'm wearing the same shirt, continuity, but I would put a hat over my haircut to make it look like I just chose to wear a hat in the pre and post show, but not to not make it look like that, there had been some dramatic difference in my appearance between the 2 days. Unfortunately, Paul has changed. How did that work out? Well, you've changed everything, where you are, your entire look. So it's very clear now that this is a different time and a different day. So you've destroyed our continuity.
Well, so let me ask this, Chris. Are there things that are more important than continuity in life?
I don't know.
Is that David? A fair question to ask? I'll show you what I'm talking about. So on Friday, I had a situation where, let's just share this desktop. You see this? Okay. I had a situation where my son, this is our family vehicle, okay, the van. My son, who's 16 years old, learning to drive, he ran it into the ditch, airbags deployed, the van was totaled. And you can see right here in front of the wheel, it was teetering on the gas tank. I ran into the tow truck driver just before recording yesterday, and his comment was, "Your son, I've been thinking about your son ever since I pulled that out of the ditch." He was in a very dangerous situation with the gas tank. And so while I agree with you, continuity is super important, I feel like maybe family might trump that. Chris, would you agree with me on that?
I really don't like this ambush. I have no visuals to support my position. So I choose not to answer that question.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I did. You told me ahead of time we're gonna talk about continuity. And
I know you came loaded for bear, as they say, loaded for bear.
Oh my God! What though? That was a miserable situation, and the insurance company's been great. The tow truck drivers, it was great. I mean, everyone has been so fantastic, and so
it didn't look totaled. I mean,
but it's the what it is there was a fair amount of damage on that passenger side. The issue was the airbags deployed. And once you have all of those airbags deploy, it's nearly impossible to get it back to the place where you call a safe drive. Does that make sense?
Yes, because because I'm a generous guy. So when Paul told me this yesterday, I shared the story of how many cars my kids wrecked. And wanted to, say that this is a rite of parent passage that we all go through. Kids wreck cars. Producer David, did you ever wreck a car when you were a youngster?
I never did wreck a car, but I feel like I missed out on something.
It's like you're playing for the White Sox, Chris. 0-2.
Well, I mean, did you even have a near accident that you could talk about?
Never have, but I wish I did. That's got to count for something.
It's fun to be part of a team, isn't it?
Oh, you know what? Here I go trying to.
So, Chris, I learned the lesson too many times growing up, and I had incredibly patient parents that tolerated and loved me through some really hard times.
I only had one tiny accident growing up. And actually, it was a profile in courage that the car did not damage more. I was quick thinking. Those of you know Chicago, the S curve in Chicago is Long Lake, Michigan, and it was icy. And the Ford Pinto I was driving at the time slipped and went across all four lanes, heading towards the wall of the side of the S curve. Oh, wow. And I maneuvered the car. So what actually hit the wall was the right front tire. So there was no damage to the body of the car. The tie rod did bend and the car was not drivable, but it was a feat of driving it. I gave serious thought to becoming an IndyCar racer after that accident, but life took me in a different trajectory.
Well, and I feel like for the sake of professional IndyCar drivers, it's probably good you didn't. You know what I mean? Because now you're giving them a chance to. I mean, it's just you can't be the best at everything.
How can you compete against somebody who can make that kind of maneuver on the S curve in Chicago? So, Paul, I know you want to talk about Election Day, and
sure. It's a thing.
Well, I think I think it's important. When who knows what crazy stuff is going to be going on. Part of we all sort of deep down think, well, once this is past us, everything will get back to normal. But it's not. It's going to be crazy. Well, unfortunately, for a while.
You're right. It's going to be. And here's the thing that I think that we can model, and I wanted to talk about. Politically, you and I fall on different sides of the coin. Like, I think you're crazy as a loon, and you think I am as well, right? I mean, truly.
I would say crazy. I refer to you as ill-advised.
Okay, again, either way, that's okay with me. I don't have any problem with that, and you probably don't have a problem with me calling you crazy as a loon, because
you're not the first.
Yeah, it's a term of endearment, right? The deal is, you and I are able to sort of, and I don't want to say we ignore political, because we still talk about politics, but what we do is we focus on what are the things that we have in common, not are the things that we are different. Because our Venn diagram, we both care about people, we both want to see our country succeed, we both want to see economic and personal prosperity for everyone. I 100% believe that. Now, I arrive at that conclusion differently than you, and and so there's this ability for us to sort of look past our differences and say, my goodness, we're a lot more the same than we are different.
Well, I totally agree, Paul. And why should political differences be any more of a wedge between people that are friends than religious differences, than which sports teams you support?
We're all those drive wedges, right? Like, I remember there was one point where I had an opposing soccer coach on my 6-year-old girls' soccer team that I was coaching, threatened me to a fight because our team was I understand that those things matter, right? But at the same time, when we can sort of breathe a little bit and go yeah, it's 6-year-old girls playing soccer. Big picture, this doesn't matter. Okay, so, we missed a call or something, whatever it was, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter.
And I think we all need to understand, and again, we don't know where we don't know where this is going to turn out. But I think the best advice that everybody could follow is, let's all work regardless to go back to a society where the opposition isn't the enemy.
No, it's not.
Different political views aren't abhorrent.
No.
And
about
it. Because again, I think Paul, you stated very well. I mean, by and large, I think we all want the same outcomes for our country and for people who live here. We differ on how to get there. That's okay.
Well, and I even say, I don't think that your view is entirely wrong. I just think for our country right now, where we're trying to do, I would go there a different way. Does that make sense? And so, depending on the situation, you might use a different tool. That's how I'd say. And I would say you probably would say the same thing about me. Maybe
exactly.
Maybe you'd still say I'm ill-advised. That's okay.
You are ill-advised, but you know what? And it might be producer David who's doing that ill-advisement.
Right.
And ill-advised is actually nicer than here's my example of the use of ill-advised to sort of paper over differences. There was a king, you know what, I love my history. There was a king called Ethelred in Saxon England who many people blamed for letting the Vikings, the Danes, into the country. And they referred to him, his detractors referred to him as Ethelred the Unready.
Right.
Implying that he was unready for their invasion and didn't take proper steps.
I mean, there are campaigns against Ethelred the Unready.
Right. But his apologists on the other hand, said, no, he wasn't Ethelred the Unready. He was Ethelred the Ill-Advised, implying that perhaps if he'd gotten better advice, he might have been ready. So ill-advised really leaves a lot to interpretation.
Your story, the irony of that story is not lost on me in any way, shape, or form. You get points.
That's one of my favorite stories from my history class, senior year in high school.
Yeah. Well, goodness. Either way,
Producer David, I mean, do you fall into the Ethelred the Unready camp or the Ethelred the Ill-Advised camp?
Well, I think that the reason that this conversation is working so well is that it's remained balanced, and maybe I'm better suited as a neutral party.
I'll tell you what. If I was sharing a hotel room with Ethelred the Unready, Chris, I would jump him so that I could get the first points on a wrestling match. Like, again, especially Ethelred the Unready.
Right. Well, that's how you'd like to have. I mean, if you knew your opponent was unready rather than ill-advised,
and I want
a lot more confident.
I want to say the value of that. Okay, so John Brockman, who went to the University of Washington, all that, he played professional basketball when he was a 9th grader. I took him to Young Life Camp, right, and he was already way better than everyone else. I challenged him to a one-on-one game of basketball, Chris, and here's how it works. First point scored wins, and you call your own fouls. Okay? He thought this is a safe plan. Oh, no, I fouled him until the day was long. Like, the game took about an hour and a half of me just fouling. But I got the first bucket, Chris. I beat an NBA player at basketball.
So he was ill-advised.
Right. So anytime you can have.
Anyway, I've allowed this to go back to Saxon England, and I'll bring it back to the present and just say, to Paul's point, right? We are very different politically, but we remain really good friends, and it's and that's the way it should be.
Right. So as you guys, watchers, listeners, all of the things are leaving this show or picking it up later this week or some other time, remember, it's going to be okay.
Yep. Take
a deep breath. And like we've survived far worse as a country. And so.
Exactly. I mean, it's Paul, and I'll riff off that. It's not the first pandemic we faced. It's not the first economic downturn we faced. It's not the first highly competitive campaign we faced. And it won't be the last of any of those things. Nope. So the sooner we learn to deal with it and each other, the better off we're all going to be. So wishing peace to everybody and prosperity, peace and prosperity, 2 great things.
Right. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching.
Regardless of what happens, we'll be here next week with another great guest.
For sure. Thank you so much.